Monster Hunter, a pioneer of its genre and one of Capcom's longest running franchises spanning over 20 games including spin-offs. The series has gained renown and a massive cult following due to its at the time never before seen gameplay loop. Players are tasked with taking down these massive monsters, not only massive by scale but also massive in terms of strength. Hunts can last up to around half an hour depending on the monster, and the game demands a lot of focus and dedication from the player. However, it is through these long, grueling hunts that the player gets rewarded not only in the form of loot used to get better equipment, but also in the form of knowledge and experience which can be used against the very monster that terrorized them in the first place. It's this slow, methodical gameplay that gave Monster Hunter its identity, giving the player an experience not too different from hunting an actual beast. Well, at least that's how it was according to veterans of the series. The 5th generation of Monster Hunter is a very special one both to new and veteran players alike. It's the generation where Capcom said fuck it, we ball, and catapulted the series into AAA stardom. Calling it a new coat of paint for the series might just be a vast understatement since pretty much everything was overhauled. Of course, at its core, it's the same game, with the backbone being its boss rush-esque gameplay loop. However, the 5th generation can pretty much be called a soft reboot for the series. Combat is a lot faster paced, tons of quality of life was added, and the more grounded, methodical gameplay was replaced with explosive, flashy, high-speed mechanics. This in turn created a sort of divide in the community. There's a handful of elitists who dislike the direction the series has taken and very much prefer the older games. Next, there's some veterans that just don't really care and enjoy Monster Hunter both old and new. Finally, there's the people who started with the new games and have experienced nothing outside of them. Now that's where I come in. As someone who spent hundreds of hours exclusively on the 5th generation of Monster Hunter, all this is nothing more than hearsay. I've never even tried the older games. I mean, I have some knowledge of them, but again, this was all gained from Reddit posts and friends and whatnot. Damn, why haven't I played an older game? I call myself a massive Monster Hunter fan, yet I've only touched like 2 of the games. Well, I guess that all changes today. Join me as I, for the first time in my life, play some good old classic Monster Hunter. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. What game did I play? Well, you can probably already tell from the footage I've been using in the background, so I won't beat around the bush. The game I picked for today's video and as my first old generation game was Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. Now, the reasoning is quite simple for that. Firstly, I'm a baby and I didn't want to throw myself head first into the very old games such as Freedom Unite or even the first game. I wanted something that would ease me into the older games, and so I picked up something at least within my comfort zone, which was 4th generation. Generation's Ultimate seemed a bit too fast-paced and would defeat the point of the video, which was to experience the slower methodical gameplay of the older entries, so I opted for 4U. Well, that and it has Gore Magala. I love Gore Magala, you're so cool. Anyway, I believe 4U has the best mix of newer generation quality of life and the older mechanics of Monster Hunter. It's able to provide a classic experience but isn't as harsh towards the player unlike what I've heard from the first couple of generations. Now, next thing I want to say is no, I did not play the whole game, well, not yet at least. For the purpose of this video, I played through the entirety of Low Rank Village, starting from encountering Gen Maran in the tutorial to slaying Shagaru Magala on top of the mountain, alongside of course doing a couple of hub quests with friends. I want this video to serve as a first impressions type video, so I think cutting it off at the end of Low Rank seems fair to me. There's gonna be a lot of comparisons from old to new gen Monster Hunter throughout this video, so if you don't like that, then I guess click off or something, I don't know. I don't see a lot of newer gen players actually picking up old generations, and I feel like our breed is sort of underrepresented among veterans. I hear there's a bit of stigma towards people who start with 5th gen, so I want this video to serve as a bridge between those two player bases. I want the newer players to see what the older games have to offer, and at the same time I want to put veterans into the mindset of someone who started playing with the more recent entries. With all that said and done, let's talk about the game. First things first, I was thrown into a very reminiscent scene. The tutorial consists of throwing cannonballs at Gen Maran while being almost butt naked. Gen Maran, I'm guessing, is somewhat of the Zora Magdaros of this game, considering how similar the sequence was to the Zora fight in World. Obviously, there's not a lot of actual fighting present in this, so the only thing that I was able to get a taste of were the controls. And I'll tell you what, you really feel the age in them. God, the camera in this game. I don't know how people played this on the DS with a touchpad, but Jesus Christ, even mapping the camera to a joystick was pretty bad. If you don't know, the camera cannot move diagonally in this game, so you kinda gotta inch it along the X and Y axis separately, which is kind of a pain. Anyhow, once I was finished grabbing the Caravanier's hat off the monster's back for some reason, it was time to say hi to my new home, Valhabar, with one goal in mind, and that was to grab a weapon. The weapon I chose was the Great Sword. It's my most played weapon in general, sitting at around 300 plus hunts. On top of that, it's a weapon that plays around timing and learning the monster's moveset rather than focusing on yourself, which I thought was perfect for tackling this older type of gameplay. Of course, there's a lot of changes to the weapon going from 5th to 4th gen, most notably True Charge Slash is now gone. The staple signature ultimate move of the Great Sword, present in World and Rise, is now all but gone. On top of that, there's no more damage numbers, so the Ooga Booga big number enjoyer within me was not very pleased about that. Next thing is that the shoulder bash or tackle is also gone, which meant I can't just stand there and armor through moves anymore, meaning there's a much bigger risk in charging your attack in front of the monster. So do I think the Greatsword in this game is bad? No, not by a long shot. In fact, I think it's very fun. Firstly, despite the damage numbers being gone, the impact you feel from the weapon is still insane. To be completely honest, I feel that 4U's Greatsword has much more impact than Rise's Greatsword. You can really feel the weight and power in 4U's Greatsword whenever you manage to connect a charge slash to the monster's face. The hit and run gameplay was really a lot more fun than I expected. Tiptoeing around the monster looking for that one opening in his moveset felt like a dance between the two of us, and it made exploiting that small window of opportunity that much more satisfying in my opinion. So after grabbing my weapon and actually putting on clothes finally, I got myself familiarized with the wondrous new cast of characters. I love the cast of characters in this game with so much new colorful new personalities, and actually fuck that, it's mostly just Guildmarm if I'm being real. She's great, man. She's great. Oh god, man. Like, I don't care if you're into Brachydios or anything weird like that. I'd be your doodle any day of the week, I'll tell you what. Man, after dealing with that idiot for god knows how long, Guildmarm was such a breath of fresh air. Yeah, I know this is overdone, everyone loves Guildmarm and stuff, but just let me bask in her glory for a bit, okay? Like, alright, Hino and Minato are great and all, they got the elf ears, they got the Hime cut, but they don't make their own plushies, do they? I mean, yeah, Guildmarm's just great. I mean, she's probably already the thumbnail of the video for crying out loud, you guys probably already expected this. Anyhow, now with my initiation rites finally finished, it was time to start my first ever quest and it's cooking meat. Yeah, so this game apparently doesn't get into the action as fast as the later games, which I guess is understandable, but it certainly threw me for a loop. So yeah, my impatient, rotted zoomer brain eventually got the better of me and I went to the hub to fight my first large monster, the Great Jaggy. If any of you have played this game, you'd probably already know that going straight for hub quests with base gear was in fact a terrible idea. Hub quests in this game are specifically designed for multiplayer, meaning the monster has some way more than inflated stats than usual, so couple that with my inexperience with the game and you have a recipe for disaster. A lot of things were going wrong, but the thing I immediately felt the effects of were the lack of consumables. I have been spoiled by botanical research and its near infinite supply of healing and buffs, so being thrown off the deep end in this game was not that pleasant. Crafting potions now take blue mushrooms, and I'll tell you what, you don't get a lot of those. Potions are now more valuable than ever, which in turn was my key to adapt a more methodical approach with the gameplay. Gone are the days of just trading damage, praying for a knockdown, now I actually gotta think about what I'm doing. Yes, you do get a lot of healing still, it is Monster Hunter after all, but they take a while to stock up on, so it's best that you budget them properly. Unless, of course, you wanna do this for an hour, I mean, be my guest. Not to mention that your character stands still and quite literally flexes on the monster after popping a heal, which is funny, but also forces you to time your heals a lot better. So while I was being a bit overwhelmed by my healing dilemma, I completely forgot about another mechanic present in this game, the paintballs. The maps in this game, unlike World and Rise, are fragmented. Each area on the map, instead of just being labeled by the number, actually serve as individual stages. This means that going in and out areas puts you in a loading screen and essentially puts you on a different map. Now, I don't really mind this much. I mean, I can exploit it to heal and stuff by going to a different area from the monster, and in general, I don't think this is really that big of an issue. That is until you forget the paintball. Paintballs are a thing in this game, yes. Unlike World, where you can find footprints to track the monster, you instead have to mark them with a paintball. The paintball marks them on the map and allows you to see what area they're in and what area they'll flee to, etc. The issue lies in the fact that if they leave the area you're in and you don't have them marked, well, good luck finding them, as they can be in any one of the areas on the map and can move to a different one without you knowing. Meaning you can theoretically check every area one by one, but still not find the monster because it just happened to move to a different one as you were approaching it. It's just a massive pain in the ass, and I'm just really glad that Capcom got rid of this mechanic entirely. So after running a marathon trying to locate Great Jaggy, I realized there probably wasn't enough time left in the quest to kill him, so I just abandoned it. Wallowing in my sadness and frustration, I decided to just keep trucking with the village quest. Eventually, my patience finally paid off and I was put up against my first foe in the game, the Celtas. Now, they were pretty evil for putting a flying monster as your first fight, so I'm not ashamed to admit it was a bit of a struggle. At this point, I was still adjusting to the new mechanics, or I guess old mechanics, and I was basically just trying to wrap my head around how the game flows. It's not a stretch to say I was using 100% brainpower for this, since it felt like every mistake I made was being punished heavily. The lack of heals, lack of easy escape options such as warbugs, and clunky controls were all piling up on me, giving me a much harder time than the game probably intended. The slow camera was really messing me up at times, and I was getting hit by a lot of attacks unnecessarily. Eventually though, after a long, hard-fought battle, I claimed my first ever kill in an old-gen Monster Hunter game. Feels good. Initially, the game was pretty frustrating at times if I'm being honest. A lot of it is way slower than what I'm used to, and not only the combat. Half the hunt from my experience is just watching your character gather stuff, and it was getting real tedious in my opinion. The game felt super unforgiving at times, and I can't lie, I was getting a bit tilted. For some reason though, I couldn't put the game down. It kept reeling me in against my will. I felt like I was constantly on the brink of calling it quits, yet I just kept going hunt after hunt. It's crazy. As I played, I eventually got more used to the game's mechanics, and it was actually relatively smooth sailing. The game only got easier the more accustomed I got to it, and the low amount of healing wasn't that big of an issue when I wasn't burning through my consumables like sticks in a Minecraft furnace anymore. I started adapting to the monsters, I started exploiting their small openings, and I learned not to take any unnecessary risks. The playstyle I adapted from World and Rise was a really high risk, high reward one, aiming for big damage at the detriment of my own safety. Of course, I learned to discard this risky playstyle and picked up one more suited for this game, and at that point, I was cruising. I got through my expeditions, fought the big bands, and helped out a bunch of people around town. For some reason to me, the progression in this game felt very natural, and there was not one time where I was wondering why am I hunting this specific monster or whatever. Yeah, I know, it's really not a big deal in terms of Monster Hunter, and most of the time they make you fight a monster just so you can fight the monster, but in 4U specifically, these random fights felt very natural. Unlike in World or Rise, the hunter in 4U just takes random odd jobs from the people living around the street. Either that or the monster is directly interfering with the caravan and stopping it from moving forward. The quests you get are very random, but it makes sense for them to be random as they are mostly just odd jobs that the hunter happened to accept. It's a small thing for sure, and I know a lot of people won't bat an eye towards this, but for some reason I can appreciate this so much and I can't put my finger on why specifically. I don't know, I just find it really charming and it makes the world feel a lot more alive than it is. So at the end of it all, or I guess the end of low rank, I made it to the big bad himself, Shagaru Magala, and I'll tell you what, he is a piece of work. I was super bad at fighting him in Sunbreak, and I am just as bad at fighting him in 4U. Calling him the hardest monster so far would be accurate as he was demolishing me at times. My heart was pounding if I'm going to be real, and my butt cheeks were definitely being clenched here. Eventually though, with enough perseverance, I put him down and saved the world from the frenzy virus or something, I don't know. So yeah, that was my experience more or less summed up for you all. So now, let's go over what I think of the game. Let's start things off with the maps. I think they're great. I can definitely see where World took its inspiration from since the maps in 4U, despite being a lot emptier, feel very much alive. A lot of them have these gimmicks present in them, like the cave map having lava that changes things around, or Rathalos' nest that he can tip over and make you do a little slip and slide. It's really fun and unique, I believe. Despite the dated graphics, I think the sceneries look beautiful and each and every map is completely different from the other with some great variety present in the game. Weapon and armor design is fantastic as well, especially after being exposed to World's shitty ass greatswords for the longest time.
What the fuck is that?
Seeing some actual variety in the designs was definitely a breath of fresh air for me. I mean, come on, who doesn't love swinging around the literal comically large knife at a giant snake? I mean, how cool is that? Now of course, we can't talk about Monster Hunter without talking about the main shtick of it all. The monsters. I know a good chunk of you clicked on a 4U video with one reason in mind, and that's to hear me talk about Gore Magala. The main big bad, the flagship of the game and the fan favorite, who doesn't love Gore Magala? Even before playing 4U, I was in love just based on his design alone, and in Sunbreak I thought he was one of the coolest monsters in the game, so I was beyond excited to meet him on his home turf. And boy did he deliver. Compared to the other flagships I've seen such as Nergigante and especially Magnamalo, Gore makes his presence known to the player. Throughout the game's story, you can really feel that Gore Magala is a big looming threat, not only due to him quite literally ambushing you multiple times, even on a boat. By the way, get fucked, the Dragonator is awesome, eat my ass. But also from the effects of the Frenzy virus. Gore Magala's entire gimmick revolves around the Frenzy virus, and I think this is an awesome and very well thought out mechanic. In lore, it affects monsters by making them hyper-aggressive, turning them into things known as frenzied monsters. Over the course of the story, you actually encounter and slay these souped-up versions of the monsters, well, you know, just so they don't run around and kill everything. The main deal with all of this though is that both Gore Magala and the frenzied monsters are capable of afflicting the player with the frenzy virus too. In gameplay, the frenzy virus is a blight that slowly fills up over time. When it does, you lose all your natural regeneration and take extra damage from any frenzy-based attack. The way you stop the bar from filling up and curing your frenzy is by doing enough damage to whatever inflicted it on you, essentially forcing you into a more aggressive, frantic playstyle. Why I think this is absolutely genius is the way that it works so well with the lore. When you're afflicted with frenzy, you as a player also exhibit the same symptoms of hyper-aggression, much like the frenzied monsters you fight. The game somehow forces you to act as if you were actually afflicted by the virus, but also provide a fair gameplay mechanic. I think gameplay-wise, frenzy is a really fair thing to deal with. It's not the most crippling thing to be affected by the debuff, but it's also ideal to cure yourself of it, putting just enough pressure on the player as they fight the monster. I don't think it's obtrusive in any way to the player, and on top of that, it rewards you if you manage to play around it well. The entire storyline with Gore and him eventually turning into Shagaru was great in my opinion, especially as far as Monster Hunter stories go. Monster Hunter games aren't regarded for the story at all, you just play them for the gameplay. But again, as far as things go, I think 4U pulled it off pretty well. I know the entire point of World was to give the player a more immersive story and whatnot, but even then I feel like 4U was leagues above World in that department since honestly I didn't know what the fuck was happening in World. Like you follow a rock around for god's sake. The cast of monsters as well is great and I'm super sad to see a lot of the monsters from this game gone from the later entries. Zamtrios is awesome and personally I think he would have made a great addition to Iceborne. Honestly I don't even know why he wasn't there. Gypsaurus and his fake death really confused me at first, but I think the gimmick is pretty damn funny and I really wish a lot of the new players experienced that as well. Tetsukabre is a really solid monster as well and again it's a shame he hasn't come back since. Overall, just a lot of unfamiliar faces were in this game and I really hope to see them again one day. On top of that, of course, you got your classics like, you know, we got Rathian, the good old punching bag. We got another fan favorite with Zenogre here, jumping around as usual. Got the walking machine Tigrex who just will not stop running into me. So yeah, a lot of familiar faces are present as well. What I really like from the monsters in this game is that they all have some sort of unique gimmick it seems. Well of course, even in the later games the monsters have their gimmicks, but they just seem so much more creative here. Celtus Queen is something we'll just probably never get again, but the concept was so damn cool to me. You got a monster piggybacking another one while they both fight you at the same time, it's nuts. Crazy thing is, this fight felt completely fair to me, unlike another gank fight in Iceborne, and I think Celtus Queen was a very balanced monster in general. Even the smaller things like Zamtrios locking in between phases, or Basarios actually hiding in the ground this time unlike in Rise just adds that little bit of character and uniqueness to these monsters that I felt was somewhat missing from the later entries. Not that I necessarily like Basarios or anything. Well, I'll just let this clip speak for itself. So no, I'm not saying the new monsters are bad, not by a long shot, but the monsters in this game just have such a unique charm to them in my opinion. Difficulty wise, I'd say the game is a bit harder than the ones I've played in the past, but for the right reasons. It's not like Rise where you die because the monster decides to delete your entire health bar just by walking, but rather the difficulty stems from its strict mechanics. 4U doesn't give you as much room for error unlike the later entries. If you fuck up your positioning or attack during the wrong time, then you're cooked. No wirefall to save your life or anything like that. Is the game completely fair? Nah, there's definitely a lot of bullshit in it of course, but the overall difficulty felt a lot more genuine in my opinion, which I really appreciated. So to wrap everything up, the final verdict... I fuck with 4U heavy. I enjoyed my time with the game a lot more than I thought I would. Sure, it's not perfect, and it's definitely rough around a lot of its edges, but the game has a charm that I don't think I was getting from the 5th gen entries I've become so familiar with. It's definitely a very different experience and a very different game compared to its successors, but I think any 5th gen player should definitely give it a shot at least once. I know 4U probably doesn't represent the entirety of classic Monster Hunter. Like I said, stuff like Freedom Unite is probably very far off from 4U as well, but I think it was a good way to introduce myself to the older style of Monster Hunter I've been missing out on over the years. I'm beyond excited to see what else this game has to offer in the later parts of it, and I just can't wait to play more of it in the future. To be honest, I'm excited not just for more 4U, but more of the older games as well. This was truly a very eye-opening experience, and it opened so much doors in terms of Monster Hunter content for me. So do I think 5th gen is bad now? No, not at all. I think it's a great direction to take the game, but like I've been saying throughout the video, the older games definitely deserve their own praise for what they've brought to the table. 4U brought me an entire fresh new experience, and it definitely made me relive that feeling, that initial spark of playing my first ever Monster Hunter game.